Have you ever spent a freezing spring morning throwing the most perfect, realistic baits imaginable, only to get completely skunked while some guy next to you catches a monster on a giant, ugly piece of neon plastic? It makes absolutely zero sense, right? Today we are talking about the biggest lie in early season fishing. We are going to completely shatter the golden rule of matching the hatch and show you exactly why your beautifully natural presentations might actually be the reason you are not catching fish. I promise you, by the end of this video, you will understand the bizarre truth about what fish actually want when the water is cold, and it will completely change your tackle box. Before we dive in, I want you to drop a comment below and be honest with me. Do you stubbornly stick to natural colors in the spring, or are you willing to throw something wild and ugly? Fishermen are absolute creatures of habit, and we hold on to traditions like our lives depend on them. For decades, old fishing magazines, veteran guides, and our grandfathers taught us that matching the exact bug or bait fish is the absolute pinnacle of fishing skill. We were taught that to be a real angler, you have to present a flawless replica to fool a highly educated fish. We carry this finesse mindset all year round because it makes us feel smart and professional. We assume that fish are always acting like picky food critics at a five-star restaurant. But blindly applying those delicate summer rules to the harsh, unpredictable conditions of early spring is a massive mistake. It is exactly why so many anglers spend their first few trips of the year shivering on the bank, changing lures every 10 minutes, and going home completely empty-handed. Picture this for a second. You are standing by the water on a crisp, early spring morning. The mist is just starting to lift off the surface of the lake. Your hands are freezing, and you are fumbling inside your tackle box, desperately trying to find a lure or a fly that looks exactly like the little bugs you see hovering around the bank. You're trying to match the hatch, just like all the experts always told you to do. But 2 hours go by, and you have not had a single bite. Meanwhile, the guy 30 yards down the bank is throwing a giant, obnoxious, bright orange piece of plastic, and he is pulling in fish after fish. It makes absolutely no sense, right? You are doing everything by the book, presenting a perfectly natural meal, and getting completely ignored. This is the frustrating reality for thousands of anglers every single spring. We get completely obsessed with imitating nature perfectly. We think the fish are inspecting every detail of our bait. But here is the brutal truth that might just shatter everything you thought you knew about early season fishing. Right now, those fish do not care about your perfect imitation. They do not care about the subtle color patterns. They are just incredibly, desperately hungry. And while you are wasting precious time tying on the perfect match, you are missing out on the best bite of the entire year. Let us talk about where this obsession actually comes from. If you've been fishing for more than a few years, you probably grew up reading articles or listening to older guys at the bait shop preaching the gospel of matching the hatch. It sounds incredibly poetic and professional. The idea is that you have to become a master observer of nature, identifying the exact species of insects or bait fish in the water, and then presenting a flawless replica. We treat it like an absolute law of nature. Your grandfather probably told you that if you do not have the right bug, you might as well pack up and go home. And in the middle of summer or on heavily pressured waters in the fall, there is a lot of truth to that. But we blindly carry that same summer mindset into the harsh, unpredictable conditions of early spring. We assume the fish are just as picky on a freezing day in March as they are on a calm evening in July. This is a massive mistake. Early spring is not a time for finesse or poetry. It is a time for survival. By clinging to these old-school rules when the water is just starting to warm up, we are actually handicapping ourselves before we even make our first cast of the day. To truly understand why matching the hatch is a waste of time right now, we have to look at things from the perspective of the fish. Imagine spending the last 4 months locked in a freezing, dark basement with almost nothing to eat. Your metabolism crashed, you barely moved, and you just survived on the absolute minimum amount of energy. That is exactly what these fish just went through during the winter. Now, the ice is melting, the days are getting just a little bit longer, and the water temperature is slowly starting to creep up. That slight warming trend flips a biological switch in their brains. They are waking up from a long, miserable fasting period, and they are absolutely ravenous. When an animal is in that state of desperate hunger, it does not have the luxury of being a picky eater. A fish in early spring is not swimming around looking for a specific type of mayfly or a perfectly sized minnow. It is looking for anything that moves, fits in its mouth, and provides a solid meal. Their primary drive is to replenish lost fat reserves as quickly as possible. When you understand this raw biological desperation, you quickly realize why spending 20 minutes trying to match a tiny bug is completely missing the point. Let us dive deeper into the concept of caloric return on investment, because this is the real secret to early season success. Think about how much energy a fish has to expend to chase down a meal in cold water. Their muscles are still stiff, their reactions are a bit sluggish, and every sudden movement costs them valuable calories. If you are throwing a tiny, perfectly matched bait, you are offering them a very small caloric reward. For a big, hungry fish, burning a ton of energy to chase down a tiny snack just does not make mathematical sense. They want a big, hearty meal that makes the chase worth the effort. That is why an oversized, unnatural-looking bait will often get smashed, while a tiny, realistic presentation gets completely ignored. You want to offer them a massive steak, not a single peanut. When you throw something bulky and noisy, you are sending a clear signal that a massive payload of calories is swimming right past their face. They will completely abandon their usual caution because the promise of a giant meal is just too good to pass up. So, put away the tiny finesse gear, grab the biggest, boldest thing in your tackle box, and give them a reason to spend that energy. Now, picture the actual conditions of your favorite fishing spot in the early spring. The snow is melting, the spring rains are pouring down, and all that runoff is washing dirt, mud, and debris straight into the water. Most lakes and rivers look like chocolate milk during this time of year. Visibility is usually reduced to a few inches. This is where the whole idea of matching the hatch completely falls apart. How can a fish appreciate the incredibly realistic paint job on your lure, or the perfect hackle on your fly, if they cannot even see it until it is 2 inches away from their nose? They cannot. We spend so much money buying baits that look exactly like real fish or insects, completely forgetting that visual details are useless in muddy water. In these conditions, realism is a total liability. If your bait blends in naturally with the murky surroundings, the fish are never going to find it. You are basically throwing a camouflage lure into a brown void. Instead of trying to blend in and look natural, your primary goal right now should be to stand out as much as humanly possible. You need to create a massive disturbance that cuts through that muddy water and screams for attention. Since the fish cannot rely on their eyesight in this murky spring water, they have to rely on their other senses to hunt. This brings us to the most important factor of early season fishing, which is vibration. Every fish has a lateral line running down the side of its body, which acts like a highly sensitive radar system. It detects water displacement and low-frequency vibrations from surprisingly long distances. When a big, clunky lure comes wobbling through the water, it pushes a ton of water and sends out strong, thumping vibrations. To a hungry fish swimming in the dark, that vibration feels like a dinner bell ringing. They will track that pulse through the muddy water and strike it purely based on feel. A tiny, perfectly matched bait barely pushes any water at all. It slips through the water column like a ghost, leaving almost no footprint. If they cannot see it and they cannot feel it, it basically does not exist. That is why ugly, aggressively vibrating lures dominate the early spring. You need something with a big lip, a massive spinning blade, or a wildly kicking tail. Stop worrying about what the bait looks like to you and start thinking about what it feels like to the fish. Let us talk about color, because this is where a lot of traditional anglers really get tripped up. If you are trying to match the hatch, you are naturally going to choose colors like brown, olive green, silver, or pale white. You want it to look like the real thing. But in early spring, naturals are often your worst enemy. Like we just discussed, the water is usually stained or heavily muddied from spring runoff. A brown bait in brown water simply disappears. This is the absolute best time of year to reach for the most unnatural, obnoxious colors you can find. I am talking about bright chartreuse, screaming hot pink, neon orange, and solid black. Yes, solid black. It might seem strange, but a solid black lure creates the strongest possible silhouette against dirty water when a fish looks up at it. And those bright neon colors reflect what little light is penetrating the water column, making them act like a glowing beacon. Sure, a hot pink lure does not look like anything swimming in nature, but right now, we are not trying to fool them into thinking it is a specific bug. We are just trying to get them to notice it. If they see a bright flash in the gloom, their predatory instincts will take over long before they realize it is fake. There is another massive psychological trigger we need to exploit in the early spring, and it has nothing to do with feeding. It is all about the reaction strike. Sometimes, even when a fish is hungry, the cold water makes them lethargic. They might not want to chase down a meal, but fish are also highly aggressive, territorial predators. If you suddenly rip a loud, flashy, obnoxious lure right past their face, they will lash out and attack it out of pure instinct or anger. It is exactly like when someone tosses a set of keys at your face. You do not stop to think about what they are. You just react and throw your hands up to catch them. That is a reaction strike. You cannot trigger a reaction strike with a slow, subtle, perfectly natural presentation. You trigger it with speed, flash, and sudden movement. You want your bait to invade their personal space and force them to make a split-second decision. When you bounce a wildly colored lure off a rock or rip it aggressively through a weed bed, you are daring them not to bite. And more often than not, their aggressive nature wins, and they smash it. Picture another classic spring fishing scenario. You arrive at your favorite bank, pick a spot, and stand there for 3 hours. You keep changing your bait, trying to find the exact perfect color or size that will magically make the fish bite. You are convinced the fish are there. They are just being picky. This is the matching the hatch mentality, and it is a massive trap. In the early spring, the fish are often grouped up tightly in very specific areas where the water is slightly warmer, like shallow flats with a dark, muddy bottom that absorbs the sun. If you are standing in one spot and not getting bites, it is probably not because your lure is wrong. It is because there are simply no hungry fish in front of you. Instead of wasting your morning digging through your tackle box for a more realistic bait, you should be moving. Keep your feet moving down the bank or keep your boat moving along the shoreline. Throwing a big aggressive lure allows you to cover water incredibly fast. You are not looking for fish that need to be convinced to eat. You are looking for the aggressive fish that are ready to kill whatever crosses their path. Moving fast beats matching the hatch every single time. Let me share a story that perfectly illustrates how bizarre early spring fish behavior can be. A few years ago, I was out on a river on a surprisingly warm afternoon in late March. The sun came out, the wind died down, and suddenly, a massive hatch of small, dark stoneflies started coming off the water. They were everywhere. By all the traditional rules of fishing, I should have tied on a tiny, dark fly and matched the hatch. There were definitely fish feeding on the surface, making those subtle little splashes. But I decided to run an experiment. Instead of throwing a delicate fly, I tied on a massive, heavy, bright white streamer that looked like absolutely nothing in the river. I cast it right into the middle of the feeding frenzy and stripped it back as fast and erratically as I could. The result was explosive. The biggest fish in the pool completely ignored the thousands of real insects floating helplessly on the surface and violently chased down my giant white lure. Why did that happen? Because the big fish realized that eating one giant meal was much better than sipping hundreds of tiny bugs. Even when the hatch is happening right in front of your face, matching it is often the wrong move. So why is it so incredibly hard for us to let go of this matching the hatch mentality? I think it comes down to our own human psychology. As anglers, we want to feel smart. We want to feel like we have solved a complex puzzle. When we figure out exactly what the fish are eating, tie on the perfect imitation, and catch a fish, it makes us feel like absolute geniuses. It strokes our ego. On the other hand, tying on a giant, ugly neon green lure and just winding it back feels a little bit like cheating. It feels almost primitive, like it requires less skill. But the truth is, fishing is not about proving how smart you are to the fish. The fish do not care about your ego, and they certainly do not care about how much time you spent researching aquatic insects on the internet. Your job is to catch fish by giving them what they want, when they want it. And right now, what they want is an easy, substantial target that grabs their attention. You have to swallow your pride, put away the delicate finesse gear, and embrace the aggressive, ugly side of early spring fishing. Once you do, your catch rates will absolutely skyrocket. Let us talk about the profile of your bait, because this is another area where fishermen overcomplicate things. When you look at a lure in your hand, you see all the intricate details. You see the painted scales, the realistic eyes, and the carefully molded fins. But a fish looking up at a bait moving through stained water does not see any of that. They see a dark shape moving against the lighter background of the sky. They see a silhouette. In the early spring, you want that silhouette to be as large and distinct as possible. A tiny, realistic bait creates a very weak silhouette that easily gets lost in the shadows and the chop of the water. You need bulk. You need a bait with a wide body, lots of appendages, or a thick skirt that pulses in the water. That bulky profile tells the fish that something substantial is moving above them. It triggers that predatory instinct to ambush a big, helpless meal. Stop looking at your lures under the bright light of your kitchen and start thinking about what they look like from 5 feet below in muddy water. You will quickly realize that bulk and shape are infinitely more important than realistic paint jobs. There is another massive variable in early spring that makes matching the hatch totally useless, and that is the weather. Spring weather is incredibly unstable. You can have a beautiful, sunny, warm day on Tuesday and a freezing, windy snowstorm on Wednesday. These constant, violent changes in barometric pressure absolutely scramble a fish's brain. When a severe cold front pushes through, the fish hunker down. Their feeding windows become incredibly short, sometimes lasting only 15 or 20 minutes for the entire day. During those brief windows of activity, they are not going to gently cruise around looking for perfectly matched insects. They are going to slash out at whatever is closest and most obvious before shutting down again. You do not have time to sit there and try a dozen different natural presentations to see what they prefer. You need a search bait. You need something loud and proud that will instantly grab the attention of any active fish in the area before the feeding window slams shut again. The weather dictates chaos, and the only way to beat chaos is with an aggressive, unapologetic presentation that forces them to react immediately. Let us also rethink what we consider natural prey during the early spring. Fishermen always default to thinking about small baitfish, crawfish, or insects. But in reality, big predator fish are supreme opportunists, especially when they are starving after a long winter. They will eat literally anything that crosses their path and fits in their mouth. I am talking about mice, frogs, baby birds that fell in the water, snakes, and completely unidentifiable chunks of meat. Their diet is far more chaotic and brutal than we give them credit for. They are not walking down the aisles of a grocery store, carefully selecting their favorite brand of cereal. They are rummaging through the dumpster behind a restaurant, looking for any scrap of protein they can find. When you understand this savage, opportunistic nature, you realize that throwing a bright pink crankbait or a giant white swim bait is not actually that crazy. To a starving fish, it just looks like another weird, unfortunate creature that took a wrong turn and ended up in the water. They are not questioning what species it is. They are just thinking about how good it is going to taste. Imagine standing on the bank, freezing your fingers off, and tying on your fourth different lure of the morning. You have tried the subtle brown one, the realistic silver one, and the tiny finesse worm. You are losing your mind because nothing is working. The problem is not what you are tying on. The problem is that you are standing still. I see so many guys get paralyzed by their tackle boxes in the spring. They cast, wait, reel in slowly, and then stare at their box for 5 minutes, debating what to try next. Every minute you spend looking down at your tackle is a minute your bait is not in the water. Instead of changing baits, you need to be changing locations. Pick 1 or 2 loud, obnoxiously colored lures. Tie them on and leave them alone. Do not take them off for the rest of the day. Spend your energy walking the bank, casting at every piece of structure, every fallen tree, and every rocky point you can find. You are playing a numbers game. You are simply trying to put your bait in front of as many fish as possible until you find the one that is fired up and ready to eat. Speed and coverage will always defeat slow, methodical overthinking. The way water moves in the spring also destroys the myth of a natural presentation. The rivers are swollen, the currents are ripping fast, and the wind is usually howling. If you throw a tiny, realistic finesse bait into all that chaos, you have absolutely zero control over it. The current grabs it, spins it around, and sweeps it away before a fish even has a chance to track it. What looks like a natural, delicate presentation to you is actually just a tumbling piece of trash being swept downstream in the eyes of a fish. To cut through that heavy flow and aggressive wind, you need a heavy, substantial lure. You need something that digs into the water and holds its own against the current. A heavy spinnerbait or a deep diving crankbait allows you to maintain contact with your lure. You can actually feel what it is doing, guide it past the boulders, and keep it in the strike zone longer. Yes, it looks aggressive and unnatural, but it is the only way to actually present a bait effectively when the water is angry and turbulent. Realism means absolutely nothing if your bait is just spinning helplessly out of control. It is also worth looking at how professional tournament anglers approach early spring fishing. These guys are fishing for hundreds of thousands of dollars. If matching the hatch and using tiny, realistic baits was the best way to catch fish right now, every single one of them would be doing it. But watch any major spring tournament, and you will see the exact opposite. They call it junk fishing. They will have 10 rods on the deck of their boat, and every single one is tied with something big, loud, or brightly colored. They are throwing vibrating jigs, oversized square-bill crankbaits, and massive jerkbaits. They are moving at lightning speed, making hundreds of casts an hour, intentionally crashing their lures into stumps and rocks to trigger those aggressive reaction strikes. They know that spring fish are completely unpredictable and that trying to figure out their exact natural diet is a massive waste of tournament time. They rely entirely on triggering primal instincts with speed, sound, and bright colors. If the guys who literally fish for a living abandon the match the hatch rule in the spring, that should tell you absolutely everything you need to know about your own weekend strategy. Let us break down a real, practical scenario that happens on the water every spring. You are fishing a clear, shallow cove, and you can actually see a few nice fish cruising around. You toss a perfectly natural-looking bait right in front of them. The fish slowly swims up, looks at it for 3 seconds, completely loses interest, and swims away. You sit there feeling utterly defeated. This happens because your natural bait gave them too much time to think. They examined it, realized something was slightly off, and rejected it. Now imagine the exact same scenario, but this time you cast a loudly rattling, brightly colored lure well past the fish, and you burn it back as fast as you can right across their face. The fish does not have 3 seconds to examine it. It has a fraction of a second to decide whether to attack or let this fleeing creature escape. By forcing a split-second decision, you bypass their brain and tap directly into their predatory reflexes. That fish that rejected your perfect imitation will turn around and annihilate your ugly, noisy lure simply because it was moving fast and acting frantically. Speed creates urgency, and urgency creates bites. So what exactly should you be tying on when you finally decide to abandon the matching the hatch philosophy? You want baits that cause a massive commotion. A vibrating jig is arguably the greatest early spring bait ever invented. It thumps so hard it vibrates your whole fishing rod, and it flashes wildly in the murky water. Big, wide, wobbling crankbaits with loud internal rattles are incredible for bouncing off rocks and triggering anger strikes. If you are a fly fisherman, put away the tiny dry flies and the delicate nymphs. Tie on the biggest, flashiest streamer you own, something with lots of pulsating materials and maybe some bright orange or chartreuse mixed in. Strip it aggressively with hard, fast pulls. You're not trying to coax them into a gentle meal. You're trying to pick a fight. Every bait you choose should have one specific purpose, and that is to be as loud, visible, and annoying as absolutely possible. When you fill your tackle box with these aggressive options, you stop worrying about what the fish are thinking, and you start taking complete control of the situation. Ultimately, what we are talking about here is a complete mental shift. It is about letting go of the romanticized version of fishing where everything has to be a delicate dance with nature. Early spring fishing is a brawl. The water is cold, the conditions are harsh, and the fish are desperately trying to survive. When you finally stop worrying about matching the hatch, a massive weight is lifted off your shoulders. You stop overthinking every single cast. You stop constantly second-guessing your color choices. You realize that you do not need a degree in aquatic biology to catch fish in March or April. You just need to understand basic predatory instincts. You need to be bold, you need to be aggressive, and you need to trust that a big, loud presentation is exactly what a hungry, cold fish is looking for. So the next time you head to the water and your hands are freezing, do not reach for that tiny, realistic bait. Grab the ugliest, loudest, brightest thing you have, tie it on, and do not look back. I promise you the fish are not going to care that it does not look like a real bug because their mouths are going to be completely full. Let us wrap this up. Early spring fishing is absolutely not the time to be a perfectionist. The biggest plot twist in fishing is that the harder you try to be perfectly natural, the fewer fish you are going to catch when the water is cold and muddy. The real secret is embracing the ugly, the loud, and the aggressive. Fish are waking up from a winter starving period, and their only goal is a big, easy, caloric reward. By throwing out the old matching the hatch rulebook, you free yourself from overthinking, tackle box paralysis, and endless frustration. You can cover more water and trigger strikes purely on instinct and aggression. Thank you so much for watching. If this video helped change the way you think about spring fishing, make sure you hit that subscribe button and leave a like right now. And I want to hear from you in the comments. What is the absolute craziest, most unnatural lure you have ever used to catch a fish in the spring? Let us talk about it down below, and I will see you on the water next time.